Hello vinyl community, how you doing? It's Bill with the Vinylverse. Welcome to my Genesis ranking videos series. This is part one, and I'm going to focus on the years 1969 to 1978. There's 9 albums to go through, and I'm going to rank them from 9 through 1. 1 being my favorite. Part 2 will focus on 1980 on, so 1980 through 1997. And then part 3 will focus on the Genesis live albums, official live albums that they've released. So a couple disclaimers about this this ranking video. First and foremost, this is my list. Everyone's entitled to their opinion and what they feel how the albums should be ranked, and I welcome you to let me know in the comments below, or even respond in a video of what your ranking would be. Secondly, by ranking these albums, I want to make it clear that there's really no Genesis album that I dislike. So even though one may, one has to be on the bottom and one has to be on the top, that in no way reflects that I don't like the album, because I'm a big fan of Genesis, the entire catalog, from their first album to their last. Of course, I like some more than others. So I just wanted to make sure I stated that there's no real bad Genesis album in my opinion. Now, how this video is going to work is I'm not going to go too deep into each album, because I don't want this video to be too long. So I'm just going to show the album and maybe point out a couple of my favorite tracks, or if there's anything of note that I want to mention, I will be sure to do that. So let's get started. Here's the albums that we're going to be talking about in this video.
Am I very wrong to wander in the fear of a never-ending line?
So coming in at number 9, the debut album by Genesis, From Genesis to Revelation. This is an okay album. It has some very good moments on it, but for the most part it suffers from some production. But the songwriting is pretty good. They were very young when they recorded this. At the time, it was in the band was the founding members were Peter Gabriel, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, Anthony Phillips, and then the drummer Chris Stewart. Now, Chris Stewart played on 2 tracks. He played on the single Silent Sun, but then he left the band and was replaced by Jonathan Silver, and Jonathan Silver plays drums on the remaining tracks. Now, standout tracks for me are Am I Very Wrong? My favorite track is In the Wilderness. The Conqueror, One Day, and Silent Sun, which was the single. So there's some very good moments on this, but like I said, it suffers from some production. There was orchestration added to some of the tracks, and it became more of a hindrance than making the songs better, in my opinion. So this is Genesis's humble beginnings, and I have to put it at the bottom of my ranking list from 1969 to 1978. So coming in at number 8, Genesis, and then there were 3. This is the first album that Genesis recorded as a 3-piece. So Steve Hackett, the guitarist for Genesis, had just left the band, and remaining were Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford, and Tony Banks. A very, very good album. It's got a lot of great moments on it, some very, very good songs. But in my opinion, it's a bit disjointed. It's a little all over the place. So highlights for me, starting with the opening track called Down and Out. Great track, and the drums on it by Phil Collins just blow my mind every time I hear it. Really, really good. Some other highlights are Many Too Many. It's a great Tony Banks song. It's a little bit of a slower song, and then there's Mike Rutherford song, Deep in the Motherlode, which is a great classic track. Really enjoy that one. And then, of course, this spawned the hit Follow You, Follow Me. It kind of gave Genesis a little more popularity, that song. So a lot of people think Phil Collins wrote that song because it's a bit of a love song, and but in reality, it was Mike Rutherford. So for those thinking it was Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford wrote Follow You, Follow Me. Coming in at number 7, Trespass. So this is the second album by Genesis. Much different than their debut. This album is a little bit more heading towards the direction they were going, more into the prog and longer songs. It's a wonderful album, great. The members in the band at this point were Peter Gabriel, Anthony Phillips, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, and the drummer John Mayhew. So Jonathan Silver had left from Genesis to Revelation, and John Mayhew joins the band and is on this album. So this album only has 6 songs. This is great album artwork by Paul Whitehead, who went on to do a couple other, actually the next 2 albums by Genesis. So, like I said, it only has 6 songs on it, and each song is very, very good, but the highlights for me is, well, the highlight is the closing track, The Knife. That's a very, very classic Genesis song. It's very aggressive. Great track. Stagnation is another wonderful tune. White Mountain is a great song, as is the opening track, Looking for Someone. So this came out in 1970. On the Charisma label, and it comes in to my list as number 7. Coming in at number 6, Nursery Crime. Now, I absolutely love this album, And at other times, I would have ranked this higher. But right now, as I'm doing this list, this is where it's fallen. It's fallen at number 6 for me. But I absolutely do love this album. This came out in 1971. Again, it's got great artwork by Paul Whitehead. So at this point, it's 1971. Genesis got rid of the drummer John Mayhew, and the guitarist Anthony Phillips quit the band due to stage fright. He couldn't perform live. So this album marks the debut of both Phil Collins on drums and Steve Hackett on guitar. Now, this album has a couple really amazing tracks, starting with the opening track, which is The Musical Box. And that became a classic of this period of Genesis. That song highlights everything that I love about the band. It is, they go from acoustic to electric, from soft to loud, very dynamic. It's just such a great song. And then the closing song, The Fountain of Salmacis, is another one. It's a very story-driven song, but the musicianship on that song is just amazing. I can't say enough good things about this album, but I had to put it somewhere, and in this ranking it came in at number 6. But I absolutely do love this album. I love the artwork. It's so unique. Definitely fits the mood of the album. Kind of English. One other thing, it also marks the debut of Phil Collins as a singer. So he sings on the song For Absent Friends, and that marks the first time he sang lead on a song for Genesis. So coming in at number 5, Wind and Wuthering. The year is 1976, and this is the second release by Genesis that year. This album came out in either November or December, I can't remember which, but I know it was late in the year. And this would mark the final album with Steve Hackett. And boy, does he shine on this album. I'll go out on a limb and say this is probably his best effort with the band. Not only his guitar playing, but his compositions too. He is spectacular on this album. Not that he doesn't play well on the other albums, but his contributions to this album, other than Tony Banks, I think were the best. So, the band members at this time were Steve Hackett on guitars, Tony Banks on keyboards, Mike Rutherford on bass and guitars, and then Phil Collins on drums. I absolutely love this album. This album artwork totally fits the bill of what the music is like. It really has that cold gray feel, but in a good way. Again, this could have easily been moved up in my list, but I had to put it somewhere, and today it falls at number 5. But I really, really love this album. So highlights for me, the two biggest ones are the song One for the Vine, which is a great Tony Banks track. It's got amazing keyboard solo in it, just great all around. And then the song Blood on the Rooftops, actually composed by Steve Hackett and Phil Collins. It's a beautiful, rich song. It's just powerful. But then other highlights include the opening track, 11th Earl of Mar. The final three songs, In That Quiet Earth, Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers, and then the closing track, Afterglow, which is another beautiful penned song by Tony Banks. And that song became a classic live staple for them. So yeah, absolutely love this album, and it's coming at number 5. So coming in at number 4, Foxtrot. Wonderful album, came out in 1972. This album, Genesis really made their mark with the prog classic, Supper's Ready. So Supper's Ready is a 21-minute or so song on side 2. It takes up the entire side with the exception of a short little classical guitar piece by Steve Hackett. This is just an amazing album from start to finish. Again, it's got artwork by Paul Whitehead. So again, Genesis at this point, it's the classic lineup of Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, and Steve Hackett. This album is really when Peter Gabriel started wearing costumes in the live shows. He first appeared as this person with the fox with the red dress. He took one of his wife's red dresses and he had a fox head commissioned for him to wear, and he came out on stage with that unbeknownst to the rest of the band and kind of shocked the audience, and that really started getting the band noticed and started him down the road of wearing costumes during live performances. So this album opens up with Watcher of the Skies, which has this haunting opening Mellotron intro, which is mind-blowing, and it really sends shivers down your spine. Absolutely love that song. There's not a bad track on this album. And of course the epic Supper's Ready. It's just amazing. So songs Watch of the Skies, Get 'Em Out by Friday, Timetable, Supper's Ready. You can't go wrong with this album. Absolutely love it. And it's coming in at number 4. So coming at number 3, Selling England by the Pound. Another Absolute classic album by Genesis. Again, it's the classic lineup of Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, and Steve Hackett. Absolutely love this album. The cover art was done by a woman named Betty Swanwick, and they commissioned her to add this lawnmower added into the artwork to suit one of their songs, which was a minor hit for them, called I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe. This has the song Firth of Fifth, which is just an amazing track and contains one of the most which contains an incredible guitar solo by Steve Hackett. It's nothing flashy or fancy, but it's very atmospheric, and it just climaxes and builds, and there's nothing like it that I've ever heard before or since. And every time you hear it, especially live, hearing him play it live just turns your spine to jelly. Absolutely love it. Other highlights on this album are the opening track, Dancing with the Moonlit Night, the cinema show. Yeah, just front to back, it's a great, great album. Comes in at number 3 on my list. Number 2, A Trick of the Tail. So this album is the first album that Genesis released after Peter Gabriel left the band. And the band could have been dead in the water, but they returned with this album, and it is just an amazing release by them. Starting with the incredible cover art, which I absolutely love. Each one of these characters takes place in a story in one of the songs. In each of the songs, I should say. So yeah, 1976. So the band members, like I said, Peter Gabriel has left the band, leaving Steve Hackett, Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks, and Phil Collins left. Genesis auditioned hundreds of singers to try to replace Peter Gabriel. Nothing was clicking, so finally one day Phil Collins just said, since he was already singing the demos and such, he just said, let me have a go at it. And like they say, the rest is history. So the opening track, I believe, was the first they recorded for this. It's called Dance on a Volcano. And amazing track. Other highlights for me, of course, there's Squonk. The closing track, Los Endos. A beautiful song called Ripples, which really the second half of that song is some of the best music I feel like Genesis has performed, with this guitar work that Steve Hackett does. He is producing some sort of weird reverse guitar sounds through his effects, and the piano playing by Tony Banks. Song Entangled, another beautiful, dreamy song. Again, great mellotron work on that. Yeah, just front to back, this is an exceptional album. Came out in 1976, if I hadn't said that already. Absolutely love it.
The chamber was in confusion, all the voices shouting loud. I could only just hear a voice quite near say, please help me through the crowd. Said if I helped her through, she could help me too, but I could see that she was only blind from a pain.
So that brings us to number 1. And if you haven't figured it out already, it's The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. I've mentioned it before as it being my favorite Genesis album. This came out in 1974 and is the final album with Peter Gabriel. Now, it is a concept album. The story is all Peter Gabriel's. He wrote the story and just about all of the lyrics for the songs, with a couple exceptions. I can't begin to tell you what the concept is. I think it has to do with split personalities or dual personality. But this album absolutely blew my mind the first time I heard it, and it still does to this day. The quality of music on this album is second to none. It's almost a continuous album where each song flows into each other. And I just can't get enough of it. So, again, it's the classic lineup of Genesis of Peter Gabriel, Steve Hackett, Phil Collins, Tony Banks, and Mike Rutherford. The 4 other members of the band kind of squirreled away in a room and recorded the music while Peter Gabriel stayed in a different room, another room, and wrote the words. This album was recorded at Headley Grange, the same place where Led Zeppelin recorded their 4th album. Some interesting stories about that place that they tell about being infested with rats and some hauntings and such. But I just absolutely love this album. I think the music is really interesting and different and like nothing I've ever heard before. And it has some of the best vocals that Peter Gabriel has ever done, in my opinion. So standout tracks for me. Now, there's a lot of songs on this, and there's a ton that are standouts. So I'll just read a few of them off of here. Of course, the opening track, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, going right into Fly in a Windshield, which is a powerful jam. Really love that. In the Cage became a live staple for them, where they would do medleys of different songs from their career. Back in New York City, Counting Out Time. I mean, I could read off every single track. The Carpet Crawlers, The Chamber of 32 Doors, Lily White Lilith, Anyway. Very interesting song called The Waiting Room, which is more of like sounds and glass breaking and weird noises and such, but it's just awesome in my opinion. The Colony of Slipperman, The Light Dies Down on Broadway, The Lamia, and the closing track, It. So yeah, I absolutely love this album. Can't get enough of it, even after listening to it for probably 100, if not more, times. What else can I say about it? It is an all-time classic for me. Absolutely love it, and it comes in at number 1 for my 1969 to 1978 ranking list. So everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this list. Again, if I'm sure you all have your own opinions or have your own lists, so if you feel like it, put them down below. I'd love to see your thoughts. And stay tuned for part 2, which will focus on 1980 through 1997. I don't know when I'll get around to shooting that, but it's coming up down the road. So this has been a video that I've been wanting to make for a long time. Finally got around to doing it. I hope you enjoyed it. I love the band Genesis and really appreciate you watching and listening to me talk about these albums that I love so much. So everyone take care. Hope you're all doing well, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.